and I have started the Civil War Roundtable, which is a group of interested people in Salina, Kansas, where my wife and I live. And we have had distinguished Professor Delmer Holman to give about 3 talks. Didn't you give 3 already? At least on your great-grandfathers?
2 at least.
2? We've been very, very fortunate, very blessed to have Delmer come and to talk with us, because we have this interest in the history of our country. But like the Whigs and the Democrats were not able to handle it because they tried compromise. And for a long time, compromise was the word, and did a pretty good job in compromising. But it finally came to a conclusion where a candidate for a new formed Republican Party by the name of Abraham Lincoln came very strongly against slavery. And that was enough to drive the southern states to secede. So that when Abraham Lincoln was elected in November of 1860, the country split, and one state after another until 11 states seceded, as you know, in the early 1860s, and participated in the war primarily from the state of Minnesota. And you had a lot of Swedish people in Minnesota and Wisconsin, so that the Swedish people did participate. And so it's been a very interesting journey for me. My son and I both reenact. We belong to the 8th Kansas Volunteer Infantry. Our commanding officer for a long time was Dr. Boo Hodges. Dr. Merle Hodges, his father, was the commander of the artillery unit, and Dr. Boo Hodges was the commander of our infantry unit, of which my son and I belong. We are the grunts, the foot soldiers. So we have really experienced a lot of interesting things. We camp out for weekends at various locations to reenact the battles that were fought at that time. And had some very interesting experiences that I could share with you in private. But they were very interesting, very interesting. When the weather doesn't cooperate, we still go ahead. And we've had some very muddy times, very cold. I froze 2 toes at a reenactment in Prairie Grove, Arkansas. And they have taken a long time, 12 years, to try to come back. But it's one of those labors of love that's kind of something that just grabs you, and I think you all understand that. What I'm going to do is to show you, this is what a Union soldier would be issued: wool pants, wool jacket, a cotton shirt, suspenders, and brogans. Now the brogans, these are more modern shoes, but the brogans that I have for the reenactments are interchangeable. Your left and your right foot are exactly the same. Which means that, you know, if the soldier dies, you can just take whatever is from him. If it's left, it's left, right, okay. There were many amputations as a result of the casualties. And my son and my son-in-law, my son is a school superintendent in Iola, southeast Kansas, and my son-in-law is the orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Byron Grauerholtz in Salina, have done partnership programs on amputations then and amputations now, and the comparison. We had a real interesting program not too long ago. But casualties, tragic casualties. And there's so many things that the Civil War did to increase our knowledge. It seems like during wartime, we are forced as a society to find new ways, better ways of doing things. First of all, better ways of killing people. Oh, are we very good at that? We discover the most effective ways to annihilate a whole group of people. And you know how that is now, with the least amount of suffering. Well, what? Strange thinking on that. But smart bombs and all kinds of things like that. But anyway, the Civil War created a great deal of improvements in weaponry. This is a replica of an 1863 excuse me, Springfield, muzzle loader, single shot. Muzzle loader meaning that it was the shell, the powder first was poured in, the shell was pushed down with the ramrod all the way down to the base of the barrel, like this. Then the ramrod was taken out. This is a very time-consuming process, unless you were faced with a charging enemy, and then you got real quick. And then you would prime it with a little mercury fulminate primer on this cone, which was here. And then it's at the command of the commanding officer. It would be ready, aim, fire, and then the hammer would ignite the fulminate, which would drive the flame through a little hole, ignite the fire in the barrel. The barrel would send out the bullet. Very time consuming. Good soldiers on both sides, north and south, could load and fire and reload 3 times in 1 minute. That's every 20 seconds. Okay, it took me 3 minutes to do one. But the cartridge box usually carried 40 rounds. That's an issue. And if you happen to run out, you steal it from a wounded soldier or anybody that happens to be dead. That is a cartridge box. Well, this is what a cartridge looks like. It's a little paper like a cigarette with a long tail, full of powder, and has on the base a lead bullet, so that when the soldier would be holding his rifle, grip it with 2 teeth, pour the powder in, and then force this lead bullet all the way down with the point up, of course. And see, this ramrod has a little tulip look to it, so that it takes the top of the bullet and pushes it down all the way down, and then you return it because you don't want to shoot off your ramrod. You won't be able to use it again. And then there's a little mercury fulminate. I'll send these around. Little mercury fulminate percussion cap that is in the percussion cap box. And that's what this looks like, a little top hat. It fits over the cone. So in this cup, tin cup, I have cartridge. I have the original were steel balls, smooth bore. This is rifle. Amazing improvement when a rifle was actually rifled, or a musket was rifled. It could make this lead slug spin, which was accuracy was increased about 10 times from a solid lead ball. I'll drop that in there for you to look at. Now pass these around. Oh, one other thing. Also, artillery developed some very deadly equipment. Here is an iron fragment from an iron-coated exploding shell. These things would explode over or in the midst of a mass group of soldiers, and you can tell how deadly or how maiming this would be. And I'll pass this around for you to look at. Also, the Civil War was a period of time where Americans were very knowledgeable and literate. They loved to read, but they did not know how to print pictures. And so the newspapers, and the 2 most popular were northern newspapers, Harper's Weekly and Leslie's Illustrated. And what they would do is these newspapers would hire artists to travel on the battlefield and would actually pencil or pen draw events, and then they would be quickly sent back to the publisher, who would have wood blocks carved with these pictures so that they could run them on their printing press. But there were people who were so hungry for the knowledge of the war. I'm going to put on this is my cartridge belt and my percussion cap belt. And also, this interesting little weapon. It was a gift. Well, I should say that the French decided that this was a very nice little thing to stab people with. And so it was given to America as a weapon, but wasn't very useful because after the rifling of the musket, they found that they didn't get very close to use the bayonet because they were killing people at 500 yards. And you can't get very close to people at 500 yards to stab them. Okay, let's see, we're going to put it this way. So that it was a very bloody war, a very sad commentary in our history, the history of our country. But it was also a very necessary one because as a result, our country was reunited and slavery was outlawed, but it caused other problems. The issue of human rights and equality among races that we are still dealing with today. Okay, this is the belt, cartridge box, percussion cap, scabbard, bayonet. Okay, this is an interesting thing too. When you attach it onto your rifle, you have to learn to use a bayonet. I have to tell you a story about myself. I, being a Lutheran pastor for 44 years, I do not kill. I try to heal. But when commanded by my commanding officer to stab a bale of hay, the first time I went like this. What did my commanding officer say? No! Pretty soon, he got me to get like an animal. And there was something in me suddenly. Oh my gosh. So, I discovered, even though this wasn't used very much, we don't use it at all in reenactments though, because it is so dangerous. It's pretty much like an ornament. It can hold a candle in your tent very nicely. That's about it. Okay. I wouldn't go too long without giving you time to ask us some questions. Canteen, very important. No army can travel without water or food. This is called a haversack. Haversack contains your bread, which was hardtack. And it was issued, but usually it was spoiled with worms, but that was okay. Because you just put it in the hot coffee, and they come to the surface, and just scrape them off. Haversack goes this side. And canteen. Every commander recognized the importance of water. Tried to stop as often as possible. Many farm wells were drunk dry when a regiment or a brigade or a division or even an army marched into their farm and the water was gone. So they go to lake or to streams. Streams got polluted. As a result, disease spread. Okay, war then created a new need for medical attention too. And so the soldiers, half of the effectiveness, or the regiments were only half effective because half were sick with dysentery, diarrhea, typhoid, terrible diseases, because the germ theory was just in the 1860s just beginning to be realized. And so much success has been done in the area of preventing disease, but at that time soldiers were very, very vulnerable Last thing I want to show you before I have questions. This was a religious age. There are many, many soldiers brought Bibles with them or were given Bibles. This is a Bible that was given to me by good friends of mine in my last church in Kensington, Smith County, Kansas. And it was owned by a private in a Maine regiment. It says here, you have the Bible of Charles H. Potter of Harrison, Maine. He enlisted in the 32nd Maine Infantry on March 3, 1864. He was later transferred to the 31st Maine Infantry, and he became a prisoner of war. I checked into the 31st Maine Infantry. They were captured in Virginia, Spotsylvania, and sent to Andersonville. Whether he survived or not, I do not know. But I am very proud to own this Bible. Amazing thing is that you have to be really good eyesight. Have good eyesight, because this is an incredibly small print. You can look at that. Okay, this is a kepi. This is a kepi. What you wear. And let's see. Oh, thank you. Did everybody get a chance to see the cartridge and percussion cap? Okay. Any questions?
How much does all that you put on weigh? The
Okay.
water, the cartridge belt, the scabbard, the whole bit. How much?
That's a very good question. It's heavy. And I would like to say that the reason why 18-year-olds or older were actually enlisted or were later drafted, because younger than 18 can't carry this.
Right.
This is 10 pounds. And marching, not just flat, up, down, back, forth, side, I get tired. See, I'm 70 years old. I can't do this anymore. But I don't like, it amazes me what resilience that the soldiers had.
Yeah.
But they were 18. There were some as young as 10 that were enlisted, that were made drummers, buglers, and sometimes just adjutants or little helpers to the general or to the commanding officer. But you had to be over 18. And the story goes that in order for a young man who desperately wants to fight in this glorious war that's going to end in a month, okay, he would lie about his age to the enlistment officer. And so he would take a little piece of paper and put 18, he'd write 18, number 18, put it on the ground, and then he'd stand in front of the enlistment office, and when the officer would ask the question, are you over 18? Yes, sir.
Oh, that's as bad as Einer's jokes.
Have you ever been, which I'd highly recommend, to the Mortuary Museum? It's in Springfield, Illinois, and it's about the mortuary history of this country, but they have objects from the Civil War where taking bodies back home necessitated a lot of inventiveness. You know, people wanted, they had these coffins with ice cases, and I mean, it's an amazing array of stuff that they did simply because of that war, and it's an excellent museum, and it's near Lincoln's, the park where Lincoln's buried in Springfield, Illinois. But that whole thing of mortuary science grew.
Right.
We saw that. It's amazing. It really is. What developments were even in embalming. I mean, they had to find, and you know, it's interesting, talk about disparity of rate of classes. The poor soldiers who had nobody home at home to pay for all that, they were just thrown into a trench.
Yeah.
And nobody really knew where they were.
There's
But
tremendous
the rich ones,
display there.
If you were a commanding officer and you were killed, you had lots of attention. That's right. So
It's,
it's just.
all the
it's way
stuff
up.
is there, I mean, original stuff.
Right, right.
Is there
Embalming fluid.
all the
and,
stuff.
all the kinds of
You know,
equipment that they use.
and then we were looking at the Civil War drum at the Eisenhower Museum this weekend, you know, and it was, it just, you know, you just think, you know,
Yeah.
some kid probably carried that, if it was a need carried in war, because it was in pretty good shape.
It's amazing, though, that we don't learn. You would think after such a horrendous war that we would have said, we don't want to do this. We want to somehow outlaw war for our country and be unique among the nations of the world. Well, it wasn't very long after the Civil War that we had the Spanish-American War, then we had the First World War, and then we got the Second World War, then we had the Korean War, and then we had the Vietnam War, and then we had the Gulf War. It seems like we don't
We
get it.
just got it, it's still going.
It's 660,000 casualties.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you look at this, at a town like the size of Lindsborg, say for instance, out of the population here, there was maybe, let's see, 100 men for a regiment. No, company. There would be 1,000 men for a regiment. Maybe Lindsborg would get 1,000 men. Well, what would happen if there was a 50% casualty rate at a particular battle? And many of those men were married, had children.
Uh-huh.
You had widows. You had widows all over the place. You had orphans. Now there was an issue that the community had to deal with. And in some cases it did. And there were a lot of broken men when the war ended. And so there were soldiers' homes where that was your social welfare agency to take care of the wounded. And crutches. Oh my goodness, crutch manufacturing, prosthesis manufacturing was just really, it just went very rampant at that time. Anything to make a dollar. Okay, thank you. You're a very good audience.
All right, we are dismissed.